Oh, thanks. Vivian got us recording here. Alicia exhibits widely, and you can see her work actually right now at the El Segundo Museum of Art. She just had a really big show in St. Louis, and of course we have it here, right here in our gallery as well. Her work is also part of the Hammer Museum at UCLA's permanent collection, the permanent collection at Glendale College, as well as several private collections. So please join me in welcoming our special guest, Alicia Pillar, to the College of the Canyons.
Oh, yay.
Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just so grateful and so honored. And you guys have been just actually like an amazing team. So I appreciate it. Okay, let's do this. I'm excited. This is my solo show, 2020 Visions. This is a really special one for me because I had a departure from my normal practice, which really encompasses a lot of history, looking at science, looking at all of these sort of big topics, and really trying to create works that sort of capture the energy around traumas and events that have happened in our past. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. You guys can see that? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with just a quick, I just did a 10-second video of the space because I am so in love with the space. And there we go. Very quick. So I am going to walk everybody through the show itself. And at the end, we can, get to some questions if you guys have any. So the first piece, the first image, these are just some shots from the actual space of all of the works together. I'm sorry, let me just fix my screen. Very big. Okay, there. So I really was thinking a lot about this show kind of as almost like a time capsule of what I was thinking and feeling through all of 2020. And this was, that was a tough time. I mean, it was a rough year, I think, for everyone. And I started the year off with this work. And this work is called Untitled 2020. And I had no clue, none of us knew, COVID was gonna happen or any of these other traumatic events would be happening. I was just really focused on what had been happening in 2019, which was already enough of, traumas just turning on the news. And I had really been reflecting on the El Paso shooting that had just happened that fall. So I was thinking about gun violence. I wasn't thinking about COVID. I was thinking just about living in a time where, gun violence is just every day on our minds. So this work really encompasses just that feeling that I was having just at the very beginning of the year. And I work with a lot of mixed media materials. This work has my signature sort of vinyl that I'm wrapping. Every single item, every single component gets wrapped in this vinyl. And it used to be leather, sometimes it's green screen, different fabrics, but basically that's the membrane, the skin that pieces all these works, all these pieces together. For this first work, again, I was, I had this image of a gun. I have this a root from a palm tree that's right above, that's painted black. And it felt like a gun. I was really just thinking about shapes and forms, just playing, but also tackling these bigger topics. There's some dry banana plants in this work. And then COVID hits. So for me, everything changed. I mean, in terms of my materiality, normally I'm using resins and balloons and all of these sort of materials that I'm purchasing or curating in, but I could not go anywhere. And also I was worried about finances, so I wasn't buying anything. And that led me to just dissecting, what do I have around me? What are the materials in my house? And so what you're looking at is one of those first works right when COVID hit. This is called Disruptions. This is not a film. And this work, I was beginning to dissect a Polaroid camera, and not just the camera, but the actual Polaroid. So all these little white squares that you're seeing are actual Polaroids, just unused. And what I did was I cut all of the ink away and took all the little packets of ink and made work with that, which I will get to in a second. But for this piece, I was really fascinated by the fact that the actual Polaroid camera, in the little part you can see here on this black piece, it says, "This is not a film." And I couldn't, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, this is weird, because I felt like that's what we were going through. I was like, whoa, we're not in a film. This is not a film about the virus. This is like, we are in it. We are living in it. So to see this part say that one line, it just was just too perfect. And I decided to not just, use these Polaroid parts for, for the actual photographs, but use the camera itself. And so also at that time, I needed a job, and COVID was happening, and so I decided to take an industrial screen printing job in a factory in Inglewood. So a lot of these works are me incorporating this whole new breadth of material that I had never used before, which was, you can see from the center, this recycled ink from the screen printing, all of my trash, all of this sort of like screen printed pages that were getting tossed and thrown away. I became like a collector of all this sort of waste from the factory. So everything became sort of devoid of color too, which was completely by accident. And normally I'm not always thinking of color. And you can see it from this piece from starting the year. I was in this sort of my usual red, white, and blue, looking at American history zone. But without me even realizing, the color just was washed away. And it really, like, once I stepped back later, I was like, wow, it almost made sense. Like, I was just feeling like we were in this black and white moment of like, where do we go? It was almost like a stuck feeling, like I was just in a fake sort of cartoon or something. So the next piece is, let's see, Biblical Proportions, Mask Making Fear. This is another large work in the show. And again, I am a lot of times working three-dimensionally, in the sense of things are standing on their own, either hanging from the ceiling or coming up from the floor. And I started to do a lot more wall pieces. And I think, again, I was like working with the space that I had, couldn't leave the house, couldn't buy new things. What do I have at home, and what can I actually make in my house right now, without having an extra studio, extra space? So this is how a lot of these works developed. It was like necessity / dealing with emotions. And so earlier I was explaining how I had taken these the ink out of the Polaroid photos themselves. And so what I was doing, I started to just play and experiment. I'm in the house all day, might as well just try something new. So I was laying out all these little packets of ink, cut them open. Then I was screen printing, and you can kind of see, here I can zoom in, just this sort of zone of all these markings. Those are all screen printed from the Polaroid ink. And to me, it really made me think of like a graveyard. And that's really where I was going. I was just like, this is the saddest time. And I kept I kept turning on the news. And I remember there were only like 11 people had died of COVID. And it was like every day I was counting. I was like, how many people today? How many people tomorrow? And it was weird. It was like you went from 11 to I couldn't even count anymore. I literally had to just stop doing that because it was traumatizing also. Um, but so this work really, I am attempting to sort of hone in on this, the deaths, the sort of atmosphere of sadness. And I'm calling it atmosphere because I feel like this work kind of became a landscape in a way to me. Again, using those Polaroid parts, thinking about a cityscape, thinking about the sky, thinking about mask making, all of that is in this one piece in itself, in various ways. So I'm gonna keep moving forward. So as you move through the show, this is the next work. And I'm going a little bit out of order in terms of what I was doing that year, but because I had started to make these works that were masks. And that was obviously because we were all encountering having to wear a mask. So for this piece, it is, hold on, I'm sorry, where are you? Oh, there we go. Morning in red, white, black, and blue. So I decided to create works that I could adorn, playing off that thing of theme of masks, but also thinking about mourning itself and how we carry that energy. Here's a side view. In this work, there's a lot of, and I'm gonna move through and then go back a little, images of ocean waves. I was thinking about this force of nature that we all are encountering and that we all have to face, a giant wave. If we're out there in the ocean, we can't, unless we run, we may not be able to, it's just, I was thinking of comparing this energy of COVID, of racism, all these things is to like literally a catastrophic event, a tsunami, a, hurricane, etc. And this work also incorporates images from right when there was the whole, everybody needs to wear masks. And there was this, I like to think of this image as zombies. Like these people were just like screaming their heads off outside of a government building because they didn't want to wear a mask. And they looked like zombies. They looked like COVID zombies, just kind of crazy. And so again, I utilize these images to sort of capture the moment, really. And this is sort of the final set of images within this piece. You see the little boy in the middle, and these are mourners from the El Paso shooting. So this had happened in 2019. I'd already been working with that imagery, and it still was very fitting to include. So just to give you all of those components, all of those images, the red at the top of this work it felt like a bone. It was actually from a palm tree. And again, I collect I incorporate a lot of natural materials and things that I'm making, things that are found. It's kind of an amalgamation of everything that I'm interested in or that makes sense, because they kind of become puzzle pieces that need to be put together to create this new sort of talisman, this new sort of energy that is an organism itself. Like I said, everything is wrapped in this vinyl. So I am thinking a lot about this organic growth of an object. And so the title, Morning in Red, White, Black, and Blue, it really just hits home. Like it's like getting beat down with all this information, getting beat down with all this news that is just hard to take, and where do we go and what do we do? And so, it just was fitting to make this a mask, but also to I'm adorning and I'm like activating it with my body. And part of it was me playing with that, but also me feeling the weight of all of this. And how do you represent that weight and that sadness, but also try to, create some sort of sense of strength. So to do that is where these 2D works come into play. I decided to, instead of just having the actual objects, the actual masks that are hanging in the gallery, I wanted to have this photographic component that sort of washes away or takes away the detail of all of those photographs you saw, all of those ocean images, and all of the, you can still get a glimpse, but they're not as important. And I was doing that because I wanted to try to capture this sense of strength, of resilience, of, so it's like these two aspects of the times that I'm trying to capture. This sort of heavy, oh, I'm skipping ahead, sorry. This heavy sense of the news weighing down upon us, but then also kind of zooming out to what is the silhouette, what do these silhouettes feel like when you step away, when you don't look so closely at them. And I wanted them to feel like almost like armor, almost like a you know, just this fierce energy that's just pushing through all of this heavy mud, you know. So this was the first 2D form. And you know, I also really heavily rely on nature to influence the forms and shapes in themselves. So I'm actively thinking about how do I mimic cellular biology. So some of them feel like maybe there's something, maybe they're a creature, maybe there's something. So and maybe they're not, but I actually enjoy that they could become their own being. So moving forward to one of the larger works, this one is called
Alicia,
Mental.
I'm
Yeah.
interrupting briefly, Alicia, just to say it's so amazing. We're getting some good comments in the chat too, but I have to say how you've just described that piece, it's so powerful. I'm glad you have such great images of it, but to be in the space with both of the works you just spoke about, you really do manage like that distance, like you are further away from that figure, you get the overwhelm of this figure sort of moving through, but this sort of weight and structure of the, red, white, black, and blue is, it's so powerful. And once having those two together, I've had folks who didn't quite see it as a mask initially, and then they see the work next to it, and then they can see, imagine the figure, and then I can't see it as not a mask, but that it takes on, someone mentioned it's like an exploded Uncle Sam hat.
Oh wow, I love that. I love
This
that.
incredible structure and the weight of it, and this sort of externalized, yeah, like armor or what, you know. Anyway, it's really
No,
exciting.
that description of the hat is like, I didn't even, and that's what's so amazing to me is like, I think all this stuff, all this history, all this, these American tropes and all, they're like embedded in my head, and they just said, you know, they're coming out on their own, whether I mean to or not, but it that makes so much sense. Thank you. Wait, hold, let me get back to this guy. Okay, so this is the next work in the show. This is Mental Landscape, Oozing Layers, Hindsight Cemented. And so this was one of the biggest mask that I made. And I like to, this is it without it being worn, but I do like to show it with it being on, because you really get the sense of what I'm trying to do. So for this work, this was the final work, not of the show, but of the year of 2020. And it was really significant because I couldn't have made it without the full year happening, because this spillage, this form that's coming out from the face, and I think I have a better shot. 1 second. There we go. All of these images, it's a chronological look at the year of 2020, starting from January towards the face and spilling out all the way till December 2020 at the end of the year. And it was this culmination piece, this sort of time capsule of the year. And the feeling really was, I kept having this thought in my head, we can't move forward, we can't go backward. Where do we go from here? And the answer was, there's nowhere to go but up. And I just had that stuck in my mind. And I say that because this work, you cannot move forward in this. The way that it's been made, you cannot actually walk in this piece. You can't really walk back. I mean, maybe you could walk backward, but it's super awkward. And why would you move backward in time? You know, let's keep moving forward. You know, so for me, it was like, there's nowhere to go but up. And I wanted to represent this work with this bare body that was just strong and still carrying the weight of not only 2020 and what had happened, but like the history of our country, you know, and really tying that into this entire structure with this red, white, and blue, with these images from all over the country. I did not include anything that wasn't in 2020, but I think it's just inherent that all of this stems from a history, you know? So I look at this as sort of this power symbol, because for me, it's, yes, we can dwell on all of the anxieties, and I did, and I, you know, I think we're all still dealing with that, but there's still this, we're still here. And that idea of still being here, still pushing forward. A lot of you guys are in school right now. You're still moving forward and you're still making things happen in your lives. And I think that's the key. That's like the sense that I want to get, is that we can still be powerful through all of this craziness. You know, and just to speak to here's some images just of the actual getting up to the close to the mask. Here's a close-up of that. And you can see all around, there's like these clues, these little hints. There's little 2020 symbols, there's COVID shapes. But yet I'm covered, but you can still see me. I'm covered, but I'm still a voice. I'm still, you know, I'm still there. And I really was thinking of this as this power symbol. So the piece that sort of the adjacent work, because like I said, I wanted to do these 2D works that took you away from the detailed images, and again, really was beginning to tell a story of almost like a superhero. I was thinking, I was like, this is like, you know, not that even though it's me in there, I don't think of it as me. I'm just like, this is just a figure, a superhero figure, just conquering all this mess. And these snapshots of power, these snapshots of strength. And that's really what these 2D works sort of became, was just these moments in time. Instead of these moments of time being the Polaroids that are devoid of any image, they're snapshots of strength, literally. So moving forward, we're going to, we're getting towards the end of the show and going around sort of counterclockwise. But this was one of the first masks that I made in 2020. And I look at it as an experiment, but it was really key to every other work being created. Like, I needed this work to push me forward into the rest. And what I decided to do was I was using, again, what I had available, which I had a plethora of all these sort of full bleed magazines. And so I decided to cut, and Full Bleed magazine, if you don't know, is an artist publication. And so there's just artist work on every single page, and it's a newsprint type paper. So I decided to dissect some powerful moments within that newspaper that came out in 2019, December 2019. And so you can see this figure rising up. He's weighed down, but he's literally in the motion of almost rising up. And also you'll see words that say, I became invisible. So I was incorporating both of these images and creating this mask that, it was me just beginning to tap into the energy of 2020. And I think I started making this mask like in March, like right when all of this stuff had happened. And again, I was thinking about the fact that we're wearing this mask and you cannot see me. You cannot see who I really am. You can maybe judge me by my hair or my eyes or whatever, but you cannot see me inside, you know? And I was just thinking about the sort of displacement of that, and also the, again, and I hate to say power so much, but like the power of that, of the invisibility. And again, thinking about it was the first time in my life, and I'm a person of color, I'm a woman, you know, I'm queer, all these things. It was the first time in my life that I felt scared to be here. Like I had to go, I forget, somewhere on the East Coast or something. And I actually, and I love to travel, but I actually felt fear around just being me, and walking down the street. And I'd never, you know, I mean, sure, there's been moments of racism or whatever in my life, but I'd never felt a fear like that. I'd never encountered that level of like, am I allowed to exist? Am I allowed to be in the world? And that was a weird feeling for me, because I do consider myself to be very confident, you know, even though I may have my own, you know, anxieties. So this work really was this sort of breakthrough moment, and also taking me back to my fashion roots a little bit, because I had not really been working with adornment until this particular piece. So moving forward, I did make an adjacent work, 2D work, and this is that. And it says I became unmistakable too. It's just the adjacent to the actual sculptural object. And this one was different because I was thinking about how to represent this sense of time and this sense of motion and this sense of not just motion, but this sense of moving forward and beyond. And so to do that, I'm playing with repetition. And again, actually those images, or I'm sorry, the square shapes in the back are me recycling back in all of my screen printing work from the factory. So again, I'm utilizing what I've got, and also not letting it stop me. Also not saying, oh, I don't have any resin, I can't make anything. No, it's like we got to keep moving forward, and we got to use what we can do, whatever we have, and it's still going to be relevant and important. So this was a very big change for me in a really great way, you know. And I hate that happened because of COVID, but you know, all you can do is you gotta look at some of the positive and sometimes. So that is this work. And now we're gonna move to the final work of the show, and that is Blindly Dismissed, Soaking in Wanton Justice. And this work is very, I would say it was probably the second mask that I made. And it happened, I made it right after Breonna Taylor was murdered. And you can see her image at the top. In this work, there's bullet casings, there's a broken scale. There's a lot of these little, there's a gun, a photo of a gun in there. I'm giving you these clues, these moments, without necessarily spelling it out. But obviously you see her face. And I wanted there to be a sense of, I am her, you are her, we all could be her. And so you see my eye coming through. And in the gallery, you know, this mask is hanging from the ceiling. So what I decided to do, oh, and here's a side view of this work. And what I decided to do was make a video. Instead of making a 2D adjacent work, I decided this one needed to be activated. So we're gonna take a look at that video. And I want to thank Beck and Call. They are the ones who filmed and edited this video for me. So thank you guys. And I think one of you are here. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video. And that is the video. And that is the whole show. And just to speak to the video really quick, you know, I will admit I don't normally do videos, but I like to dabble in many things. And I think it's just for all you artists that are listening, it's important to just, you know, test the waters with everything. But for that particular video, I was really thinking about just this strangled energy that I think we all have been, you know, encountering and dealing with. And it was actually weird to watch that because I haven't seen it in a while. And it's just this sense of anxiety, oof, lots of anxiety, and feeling like I can't, almost like you can't escape. And that is why I try to create some works that have some sense of hope, because I do not like to bog you down with so much of that sadness, but I don't want you to forget. I don't want you to ignore it. I don't want you to, you know, think that, oh, everything's fine. No, everything is not fine, you know? And so how do we tackle that sense of, you know, anxiety while also maintaining a sense of sanity? So I think that that is it. And I'm ready and open for questions.
Thank you, Alicia. That's so exciting. And I love that. Actually love the video started in and then came out, and you could really see it go either way. I wanted to take one of the questions from the chat, and I'll also leave a message for students who would like to. Oh, I'm sorry, I muted. If students would like to continue to use the chat or unmute. But one of the questions were, how heavy are the masks?
Oh, they're relatively light. The one that that spills out to the floor, it's not even that it's heavy, it's just cumbersome. It's just, you know, it's not really meant to be worn around. You could try. But also I just want to say I usually make works that I can lift because I'm working by myself.
One of the students commented on, I forget the name of the title, but the one that you're fully wearing, and you were saying you can't really go backwards or forward, and that there's this upward feeling. And they were also commenting on that they love that idea, you know, because that we felt like we've all struggled with that during COVID, especially moving forward. So really a lot of comments on that upward and onward, in a sense, not to forget, but you know, that there's a space. And then you said it later that you create a space, seems like even within your mask, for an escape, you know, to get out.
Yeah, I love that.
Let's see, I'm going to look in the chat as well, and I welcome you all. How do you, this is from, I think it's Sarah, how do you make art about such a current event and still feel like you're making a unique statement?
Ooh, you know, I think that when I'm working, I don't really think about any of that. I'm just like, I am working to get it out of my system. And then later is when I step back and I'm like, oh my God, that really made sense, or that really encompasses what's happening today. So I wouldn't even say that I didn't start the year off planning a show. I didn't start the year off thinking I'm going to make a body of work. It was more just me needing to, you know, the sense of like, I need to do this. And then all of the rest falls into place just naturally. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Please feel free to use the chat. And if I may, I want to make a comment on your reliance on nature and that influence there. And we have lots of, I know, art students and maybe just even lovers of art in the room. Can you elaborate more on that use of nature, that inspiration?
Yeah. So for me, that's like the way I survive this planet. I'm like, I need to be walking, I need to go on a hike, I need to like look closely at like literally a flower, you know. I'm like looking very closely because to me, like, nature is the best artist. Like there's things that we could never even imagine in nature, that forms and shapes and creatures. And so all of that is just my nerdy side, I'm fascinated by all of that. But more than that, I like to look to nature as this inspiration for form. And so I really like to think of things as cellularly being built cellularly. Like I said, each component, no matter how tiny it is, it gets wrapped in the vinyl. If it's huge, it gets wrapped in the vinyl. Everything is pieced together to become its own organism. So, it's just my own interest. But more than that, it's not just like I'm using nature within the work. I'm using an inspiration, but I'm also incorporating man-made materials as well, because we all exist together. You know what I mean? Like human beings are existing with nature, so I try to encompass like the world around us in one object.
I'm interested too, like in your background with studying anthropology as well as visual art in terms of, your connection to history and science and how, your process for thinking things through. It sounds like, you're inspired by the materials around you, you're inspired by the nature around you, but then you also sort of have information about these sort of structures of knowledge and other disciplines and their sort of ways of working into cultural ideas and problems. Anyway, I'm interested in how you bring those things together.
Yeah, it's it happens differently each time. I think sometimes I'm really like, especially for a lot of these works, I was really obsessed with these clear masks that kind of did nothing. Like those masks really should not be worn outside. But I was so fascinated by them as an object, and that really became this moment to like expand, and so especially for this show, I wasn't even necessarily thinking of like my anthropology stuff. I wasn't thinking about my normal things, which is cultures and peoples. I was thinking about the here and now, which again is very different from my other work. It was this immediate need to capture the moment, this urgency. So I think in a lot of the works, there's some a little bit of a loss of the sort of interest in anthropology, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, they still have to do with humanity, and so maybe there's some, there's a crossover that can be made, or a connection. But I think that it depends on the work. Like for instance, like maybe the mask inspires me, or maybe it's that I was looking at an actual news headline and I like the zombie people that I used an image of, and that I let them lead the way. I'm like, where do you guys need to go, and sort of like let the materials tell me where they want to be. And a lot of those little zombie people were like hidden. I didn't really want to look at them, but they needed to be there, so it kind of it's like each material gets mixed in how it needs to go, and it tells it talks to me.
I love that. From Miriam, would like to know, so would you say that creating these pieces became a coping mechanism for you during the pandemic?
Yes and no. I think I'm always, I'm a workaholic, so I would be making anyway. But yes, for sure, I needed, while we were, especially in the beginning, when we were locked away, not doing anything or going anywhere, these became like a weird therapeutic, it was like me putting myself in the trauma, but then also taking myself out of it by just being meditative and actually creating the work. So there's this mix of therapy, but also trauma that I'm also reintroducing into my own life. But yeah, I don't know if I answered that. Sorry.
Would you then encourage students who are looking for inspiration? I feel like with a lot, they might hit this roadblock or look for a space of inspiration with a project or a class. Would you encourage them then to kind of dig into that, what's happening in their world or even traumas?
I mean, I wouldn't say yes per se, because I think that it really depends on the person's capacity to deal with the trauma. Sometimes reintroducing trauma is not good for people. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's not helping. I think that when it comes to making your own work, I think you've got to focus on what your interests are. Now, if your interests are in, looking at traumas, do it, but I don't feel like people have to do it because the times are traumatic. No. I mean, I think that it makes sense because I think as artists, we're trying to work through a lot of different, issues and things, but I don't know if, I've done works where I've made pieces with, hundreds of images of people who have been killed by the cops or gun violence in a certain time frame, and doing that, making that one sculpture out of all those images was very, it was hard. It wasn't therapeutic. It was actually putting me right in the mix of the trauma. But I felt for that work, it was super important. So I think it just depends on what you're doing.
And there's a question, Naomi, please.
Oh, hello. I mean, first, I really love the fluidity of form, sort of like some are wall pieces, some are, sculptural freestanding or hanging from the wall or being worn. Like I love how you can move between those using similar materials. I was just wondering, for any given piece, do you have a set, like the finalized? Do you know beforehand whether you're like, this one's a wall piece, this is going to be freestanding, or do you, like, as you are working, does it become apparent?
All of the above. No, literally. I mean, because I tend to work organically, and a lot of times I will draw. There are times I'll draw things out, but that's more rare. I definitely like to just let the thing go where it's going to go and let it grow to its capacity, whether that's small or big. And it, again, it tells me what it wants to do. And then, like I said, I don't always work 2D. A lot of the work here is more 2D. But it was like, it's not that I don't, it's just, what I was feeling at that time. And actually, logistically, did I have the space to make something bigger? And at that time I didn't, so I had to work with what I had. But I do think that, I'm just trying to think, like, some of the flat ones have become, three-dimensional forms, because I'm like, no, this cannot be on the wall, like I'll yell at myself about it. I'm like, and hi, Naomi, nice to meet you, by the way.
Hello.
I'm coming to class the other day.
Yeah, you are.
We have another question. How do you, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it though, how do you adhere the pieces together? Are they sewn? You mentioned that you use resin.
Yeah, and actually most of these, I would say 95% don't have resin, and that was because of COVID and I wasn't spending a lot of money. So I switched over to using a gel medium, but I do a lot of gluing, sewing, nailing, screwing things together. I'm just looking around to see what I've done. It kind of depends. It's more solution based. Like, what do I need? How is this thing going to hold together? Do I need to sew it? If I need to sew it, I have to sew it. Can I glue it? Because maybe that's faster. Like I like to utilize all of my craft and sculptural skills in one thing, because you just don't know. Like, maybe I will need to just sew this one little thing on. But a lot of E6000 and lots of glues and things.
In terms of utilizing, in this particular case, right, you were utilizing what you had in your studio. You were in the time trying to sort of organize it, control. I mean, there is a lot of dealing with trauma, but there is also a lot of power and strength and, making hierarchies. Where are the zombie people going to go? Yes, they have to be part of the story, but this is my story. Where are they going to go within this story?
Yes.
I like too that, even bringing in your day job, right? You were working as this industrial screen printer. And so then those materials and those processes came right into the work that you're making. And I think working with newcomer, younger artists, a lot of times, and this is not across the board, but I do experience a subgroup that kind of they kind of put those stories of like, well, who they might be or where they might work or the things that they surround themselves in their home sort of aside to work with like art materials, which, you know, I love art materials too, but I think there's real power in the stories that the found materials, and even as you're sharing, even how you found them or came across them, that it gives a kind of immediacy or a way into these works on another level too. And anyway, and there's a power in that, like insisting on the beauty of plain things or letting color, which is so huge in so much of your work, kind of drain out, you know, because that was the moment.
Exactly.
You know, it's just, it feels like for those of you who haven't come in yet, you have to come see the work because it's a real gift being in the space with the work. I mean, you talk about energy sometimes in some of your interviews, and you talk about the energy around the wounds and things. I really do feel like not only because of the multiple parts and the labor involved, I'm sure, but there does feel like there's these lived energies in the materials that you use. How do you, can you talk about that a little?
You're seeing my vision. I love it. Yeah, I think that because I'm touching and every portion of the piece, like no matter what, like, well, first I wanted to just say, when you said art materials, that was funny. I mean, I think it's interesting because like I'm like, everything is art materials. Like we should, you know, especially you, I know I have some people from class watching. I'm like, everything from the plants on the ground to like, you know, this old carpet or your shoe, whatever, all of it can become an art material. And so that's the way I look at everything. Like I'm sure my family or whoever gets annoyed with me, I'm just like, that's a sculpture, you know, like everything becomes a sculpture. But I am very interested in energy and how combining materials that are from different histories, different manufacturers, different, you know, wherever they've come from, they all have their own history. And what does it mean to bring all of these histories together into one object? To me, that's like magic. That becomes like almost like it's its own totem. It's its own object that can do something. And what I'm hoping it does is just it's opening your mind to either what's happening in the world for this show in particular right now. For other works, it's, you know, what's happening now because of the past, you know. So I'm really interested in how to create a sort of, I don't know if magic is the right word, but this object that is imbued with energy. And I love that you can actually feel it when you're walking around. It's really like makes me happy.
We're so jealous and we can't. I feel it through the Zoom too.
Thank you.
We have a couple more questions. One, how much do you worry about your viewers being able to interpret or understand your art?
I mean, I care, but it's not always on the forefront of my mind. I think it's a process of me. It's what do I think? What do I need to get out? And then once the piece is done, the viewer comes into play when I'm thinking about my titles, because I do like to give you some clues, you know, and so the clues come into play with my titles. The clues come into play with any of the visual imagery that you see within the work. I want people to like be like, whoa, what is that? Oh, it's so pretty. Oh, and then they come up close. They're like, oh, this is something bad, or this is something scary, or this is something from the news that I didn't know I wanted to look at. You know, like I like that play of sort of the sublime and the ugly and the awful. Yeah.
I love your titles and your use of language, and you know, this is not a film repetition, that you were able to absolutely, you know, like, wow, I can just imagine, you know, seeing that and resonating with it, but then to take advantage of it and then to be able to help us be able to see that moment you had when you're really taking apart media, right? And we're all in this time when we're in our homes, you know, we're either like doom scrolling nonstop, trying to get some kind of satisfaction that this something's going to change for the better somehow, right? But to sort of be literally taking the cameras apart and then having that sort of repetitive phrase in the work, the images work as phrases too, you know, even just 2020 now works as a, right? It brings up a whole list of stories. And then your actual titles, there's a lot of poetry as you move through on a language level as well as a visual level.
And I'm not a poet, but that's like the biggest challenge I think of doing the work is me trying to capture the essence of what it is through a title. It's pretty, I mean, I could say untitled, but then I think if I said untitled for everything, that to me, that means I am caring less about what the viewer thinks. And I do, and just to go back to that question, I do care. And so that's why I do put some time into the titles.
As an English professor, you are a poet. It is A+ in that class. It's, you know, the cemented hindsight I commented on earlier, just the level of thought that's in there. It's amazing. We have one more question for you. Have you ever started a project, didn't like the direction it was going towards? And if so, how did you work around that?
Oh, all the time. Like my place is, I live in a live work warehouse space. It's covered in stuff that I've made. It's like I'm hoarding all the mistakes. But I don't look at them like that. I look at them as like I needed to get out this feeling, this I needed to do this technique. I needed to try this shape. And you know, then I'm like, oh, this isn't really, I'm glad I made this, but now I don't know where it goes. And so it gets put on a shelf and then 3 years later I use it. So I never throw things away because I'm like, even though my brain made this now, I'm not ready for it now. And so I know I'll be ready for it in a couple of years. And just a good example of that is I always talk about the piece that went to the hammer in that work, which you can see on my website, but just the top of it has these pink, they look like flowers, but they're plastic bags that I've been hoarding since 2005. So, and I just used them in 2019. So, you know, you just things get put away for later.
Thank you. And I want to read, Vivian left a comment. She's there and like, but I have to read it because I really think it encompasses like what we all are thinking. So thank you, Alicia, for your workaholic tendencies and your vision of 2020, your ability to express emotions and thoughts that perhaps we all thought and didn't even know we felt, allowed me the opportunity to digest and process 2020 in a visceral manner. Your biological approach made it even more approachable. I absolutely agree. Things that I didn't think about. I know another A+, Vivian, come to English.
Yes, Vivian.
It's beautiful. But yes, having people think about things that they didn't know to think about, you know, and then in this manner it's throughout all of your art. And I know we've had conversations about the layers in it, but how important is that biological approach? Is that giving your audience, you know, something to think about? You know, how important has that become?
Definitely, like, very important. You know, I want the work to not just be a portrait. I want it to be a portrait that tells you something or makes you feel like you need to do something, you know, like I want all of my details and workaholic tendency. I want all of that to inspire everyone to get to work, literally. You know what I mean? I want, and not to say make a sculpture, but that, because that's just what I'm on the planet to do. But whatever that means for you, it's like we all should be doing our part in some way to push forward culture, to push forward humanity. And I know, and I just feel like this work is my job to like get the word out or to awaken in some way, even if it's small, it still matters.
I just love that. And, you know, one of the wonderful things about being able to bring these kinds of opportunities to our students, whether it's in the virtual realm like this or people able to come in to see the show, is that, you know, I feel like that power of people creating and making choices to move forward, to share parts of their story that help us understand our own stories.
Yes.
I just see it, you know, I've gotten to do this for a little while in different venues, and I've seen how students and other viewers of art come and start taking in and understanding that this is theirs, to utilize, to inspire, to make them ask questions, to just be with. And Vivian and I, because we're here all the time, we get to live with the art. And so that's why, you know, I love that comment, Vivian, because that's one of the things, you know, we run in to like see it when we get here, you know, and think about it all day, and get to see other people experiencing it for the first time. And that it's nothing like the artists themselves living with their own work and creating it, but there is something about visiting and revisiting, like rereading a text or developing relationships with people. It's really powerful work. And I'm, with all that you're doing, and for those of you who might live elsewhere, like, you know, El Segundo has some at the museum, has some of Alicia's work. There's going to be some big shows coming up in the winter as well. I really hope that you'll make your way to find, and also look at the website. There's so many bodies of work. So aliciapillar.com.
Yes.
Check that out. But please do stop by the gallery to see the work as well. And if you can't come during our open hours, we have the work until mid-December-ish. You know, give
And
us a
just to
call.
say, the open hours are what are the days?
Go ahead, Vivian. Unmute.
Myself, it is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we can open by appointment. So if you shoot us an email with enough notice, we're happy to open for just you, or you and a friend, or you and a class, so that you can see the work too.
Thank you so much. I'm so, like I said, I'm honored, and I'm just really grateful for everybody also on Zoom. There's so many people, and I'm like, thank you.
We have some viewers on Instagram as well. We're live.
Nice. Amazing.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Alicia, for everything. And thank you, Angélie, for
Oh my
joining
God,
us
Angélie.
today with your insights and your seamless managing of things. It's like, wow, she's so good. And I hope all of you have a great time thinking back on what you heard today, and the images that you saw today. And we hope you'll see us in the gallery.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye all.
Bye.
Thank